All right, welcome back everyone to the deep dive. We always try to bring you the most interesting, the most thought-provoking ideas out there. And today we're going deep on something really, really fundamental to how all of us learn. We're talking about metacognitive theories.
Yeah. Metacognitive theories. Sounds a little intimidating maybe, but really think of it as like a deep dive into how your own mind actually works when you're thinking and get this, how you can use that understanding to learn better, to become a more effective learner.
And we're not just speculating here. We've got some serious academic firepower to guide us.
Hmm.
We're diving deep into a framework laid out in a 1995 paper by Gregory Schraw and David Moshman.
That's right. This paper really breaks down what these metacognitive theories are, why they matter so much, and honestly, how they're probably already shaping how you learn, even if you don't realize it.
So let's unpack this a bit. Schraw and Moshman, they define metacognitive theories, broadly speaking, as the way we organize our thinking about our own thinking. It's not
Yeah.
just thinking, it's how we understand and direct our own thought processes.
Exactly. And it goes beyond just the thinking itself. They talk about this thing called metacognitive knowledge, which is basically what you know about your thinking. Like, are you aware of your strengths and weaknesses as a learner? Do you understand what factors help you learn best?
And then there's the doing part, the action. They call it metacognitive control processes, which is essentially how you use that knowledge, that awareness of your own thinking, to actually guide and manage your learning. It's like, knowing you study better with music and then putting on some tunes when you hit the books.
Yeah, great example. What's fascinating here is that we all engage in metacognition to some degree, but the way we each put these pieces together, the thinking, the knowing about thinking, and the controlling of thinking it, can be wildly different from person to person. We each create our own unique theory about how our mind works.
It's true.
Yes.
It's kind of like we're all scientists experimenting on ourselves in a way. Okay, so the paper starts by laying out what they call traditional ideas about metacognition. And the core distinction they make here is between, as we were just saying, metacognitive knowledge, that's what you know about your own cognitive processes, how your mind works, basically, and metacognitive control processes, which is how you use that knowledge.
Right. It's about putting that knowledge into action.
Yeah.
And they go into quite a bit of detail on that first part, the knowledge of cognition. They break it down into 3 types of awareness.
3 types, okay.
Yeah.
I'm all ears.
All right, so first, you have declarative knowledge. It's knowing about things. It could be knowing about yourself as a learner, knowing your strengths, knowing your weaknesses, or maybe it's understanding what things affect your performance.
So for example, the paper talks about this research on metamemory.
Oh, no,
Memory, is that like memories about your memories?
kind of. It's more about our knowledge of how our own memory works. And the research shows that adults, generally speaking, understand memory processes way better than, say, young children do.
That makes sense, I guess. We've had more time to try to remember stuff and figure out what works.
Exactly. And here's where it gets even more interesting. One study found that among college students, the ones who had a better understanding of their own memory, like they could accurately predict how much they'd remember after studying, they actually did better in their courses.
Really? Wow. So knowing about your memory can actually affect your grades. That's wild.
It is. It shows just how powerful metacognitive knowledge can be. And then we have the second type of awareness, procedural knowledge. This is knowing how to do things, how to perform specific tasks, how to use learning strategies.
Okay, so it's more like knowing how to use the tools, not just knowing what the tools are.
Exactly. When you have strong procedural knowledge, you tend to use those skills more automatically, and you're better at combining different strategies in the right order. Like, imagine knowing how to outline an essay versus just knowing that an essay needs to have an introduction, body paragraphs, and a conclusion.
Yeah, the how-to makes a big difference there. Do they have any research examples of this procedural knowledge thing?
They do, actually. They mention a study where 5th graders were given specific training in how to use certain prompts to help them solve problems. And those students, not only did they score better on regular tests, they also did amazing on a brand new computer-based problem-solving task.
Wow, so knowing how to approach a problem really does make a difference. That's pretty encouraging.
It is. And then the third type of metacognitive awareness is conditional knowledge. It's more about knowing when and why to use certain cognitive actions, knowing which strategy is best for which situation. It's about understanding the relative usefulness of different approaches. Like, have you ever noticed that you read a news article differently than you would a textbook chapter for an exam?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, with the textbook, I'm highlighting, taking notes, trying to really memorize. But with a news article, I'm more likely to just skim it, get the main points.
Exactly. That's conditional knowledge in action. And the researchers, they found that college students do exactly that. They adjust their reading strategies based on what they're reading and what they need to get out of it.
It makes sense. I mean, if it's a dense academic article, you got to go slow and really pay attention.
Right. And this ability to know when to use which strategy, it actually keeps developing all the way through middle childhood and beyond. So, to recap, those are the three types of knowledge of cognition: declarative, procedural, and conditional.
Okay, got it. Knowing about things, knowing how to do things, and knowing when and why to do them.
Exactly. And as the paper points out, skilled learners, they tend to have more of all three types, and that helps them perform better across the board.
Makes sense. So we've covered the knowing part of metacognition. What about the doing part? How do we actually regulate our thinking?
That's where the second big piece comes in, the regulation of cognition. These are the mental activities you actually do to manage your thinking and learning. And the authors highlight three main skills here: planning, monitoring, and evaluation.
Okay, planning, monitoring, evaluating. Sounds like a good study plan.
It is. Let's start with planning. Planning involves choosing the right strategies for a task and figuring out how to use your resources effectively.
Resources like time and energy.
Exactly. Like, think about how you approach a big project at work. Do you jump right in, or do you take a moment to plan out the steps, figure out how long each part will take, maybe break it down into smaller chunks?
Oh, I definitely need to plan things out. I'm a big list maker. Does the paper talk about planning much?
Yeah, they discuss some really interesting research on writing. It found that the ability to plan actually improves quite a bit between the ages of 10 and 14.
So as kids get older, they get better at planning out their writing.
Exactly. The more experienced writers, they tend to engage in more global planning. They think about the big picture, the overall message, the structure. But less experienced writers, they often focus more on just getting that first sentence down.
I can definitely relate to that. Okay, so planning is about getting organized before you start. What about monitoring? What's that all about?
Monitoring is your ongoing awareness of how well you're understanding something as you're working on it. It's like checking in with yourself. Am I getting this? Is this approach working? Like when you're reading and suddenly realize you haven't absorbed a single word for the past few minutes.
Oh yeah, I've been there. It's like my mind just wanders off. So how do we get better at monitoring? Is this something you can learn?
Well, it seems like monitoring abilities develop over time, but there's a strong link between your metacognitive knowledge and how accurate your monitoring is. If you have a good understanding of how, say, reading comprehension works, you're more likely to notice when your mind is drifting.
So it's like if you know your weaknesses, you're better at catching yourself when you slip up.
Exactly. And the good news is research shows that you can train people to be better at monitoring. There was this one study where they trained students to monitor their own problem-solving processes, and those students ended up becoming much better problem solvers overall.
That's really cool. So planning is getting ready, monitoring is checking in along the way. What about evaluation? Where does that fit in?
Evaluation comes at the end. It's about assessing how well you did and how effective your strategies were. It's asking yourself, did I achieve my goal? What worked well? What could I do differently next time? It could even mean going back and revising your initial goals if they weren't realistic.
So it's like a debrief after the project's finished.
Yeah.
And the paper ties this back to writing too, right?
Yes. They found that less skilled writers often struggle with revising their work because they have a different idea of what writing even is. They might see it as just knowledge telling, like just putting down everything they know about a topic.
Just dumping information on the page.
Exactly. But good writers, they see writing as knowledge transforming. They're actively shaping and refining their ideas for the reader.
So that difference in understanding the writing process, it affects how well they can evaluate and revise their work.
It does, and it goes back to that connection between knowledge and regulation. What you know about thinking influences how you control your thinking. They're constantly feeding into each other.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've got the traditional view of metacognition. Now let's move into what I found really fascinating: defining and categorizing different types of metacognitive theories. So in this context, what exactly is a metacognitive theory?
Well, put simply, a metacognitive theory is a framework that brings together both your knowledge about cognition and your ability to regulate it. It's how you make sense of your own thinking.
So it's more than just a bunch of facts about the brain. It's like your own personalized model of how your mind learns and solves problems.
Exactly. And Schra and Moshman, they point out two really important things about these theories. First, they integrate a huge amount of knowledge and experiences into a single cohesive framework, Without that integration, your knowledge and skills might be kind of scattered, hard to apply in new situations.
Like having a toolbox full of tools, but not knowing which one to use for which job.
Perfect analogy. And second, these theories let you explain and predict cognitive behavior. Not just your own behavior, but other people's too, and even thinking in general. Like if you understand what makes a really good problem solver, you can use that to become a better problem solver yourself.
So these aren't static things. They evolve and change as we learn and grow, right?
Absolutely. And the paper proposes that there are three main types of metacognitive theories, and they exist on a spectrum.
Okay, 3 types. Let's hear them.
All right, first up, we've got tacit theories. These are the ones we develop without even realizing we have a theory. They're kind of like subconscious beliefs that guide our actions.
Subconscious, so we're not even aware of them.
Right. The paper gives the example of Carol Dweck's work on implicit theories of intelligence. Some kids, they have a growth mindset. They believe that intelligence can be developed. This belief then influences how they respond to challenges, even if they can't actually articulate it as a theory.
So it's like deep down, they believe they can get smarter, and that affects how they approach learning, even if they don't realize it.
Exactly. And what's tricky about tacit theories is that they can be really hard to change. Because you're not consciously aware of them, you might not even question them, even when you see evidence that contradicts them.
So someone who's always thought they're bad at math, that belief could hold them back, even if they actually have the potential to be good at it.
It's definitely possible. Okay, next up, we have informal theories. Now, with these, you have some conscious awareness of your beliefs about thinking, but you haven't built a fully developed explicit structure yet. You're starting to think about your thinking, but it's not super organized.
So it's like a step up from tacit theories. You're starting to pay attention to your mental processes.
Right. And the authors say that these informal theories, they often start out being domain specific. Like you might have a different approach to learning a musical instrument than you do to studying for a history exam. But over time, you might start to see connections, common strategies that work across different areas.
So you start to generalize, like, oh, this planning strategy that works for writing essays, maybe I can use it for planning a project at work, too.
Exactly. And a really crucial development at this stage is realizing that knowledge isn't just passively absorbed, it's actively constructed by the learner.
Oh, that's a big one. It means we have more control over our learning than we might think.
Absolutely. And another important step is recognizing that our beliefs can be wrong. This lets us reflect on our performance more objectively and make changes based on that reflection.
Like if you thought you studied enough for a test, but then you got a bad grade, you might realize your study methods weren't actually that effective.
Exactly. You start to separate your personal experience from the actual evidence. And that ability to reflect and adapt is a big advantage of informal theories. You're starting to see your thinking as something you can actively influence.
Okay, so we've got tacit theories, we've got informal theories. What about the last type, the formal theories?
Formal theories are the most sophisticated. They're highly systematized, explicit accounts of cognition. You might encounter these in advanced academic studies, like the paper mentions Sternberg's triarchic theory of intelligence.
So these are like the big, well-developed theories you learn about in college courses.
Right. And the authors point out that it's actually pretty rare for people to have fully formal theories about their own learning and thinking outside of their area of expertise, that is.
So even a brilliant teacher might not have a perfectly formalized theory about how they teach.
Exactly. But when these formal theories do exist, they can have a huge impact on how someone performs and understands their own performance.
Because they have a really clear framework to work with.
Right. Someone operating with a formal theory is very aware that they're building a theory, and they actively try to refine it and test it against evidence.
They're like scientists studying their own minds.
Exactly. And a key characteristic of a formal theorist is that they can distinguish between the theory itself and the evidence used to support it. They understand that the evidence is important, but it doesn't define the theory.
Okay, so we've got this progression from unconscious tacit theories to more conscious informal theories to the highly sophisticated formal theories. It's like our understanding of our own minds gets more complex over time.
It does, and that leads to a really interesting question. Where do these theories come from in the first place? How do we develop them?
Yeah, how do we go from not even knowing we have a theory about thinking to having these elaborate frameworks for understanding it?
Well, the paper talks about three main sources. First, there's cultural learning. This is the idea that we learn a lot about thinking from our culture, both through everyday experiences and through more formal education.
So like our families, our schools, even just the media we consume, all of that shapes how we think about thinking.
Exactly. And a good example of this is programs like Informed Strategies for Learning, or ISL. These programs actually teach students about different learning strategies, how to use them, and when to use them. It's explicit metacognitive instruction.
So it's like learning about learning itself.
Yeah.
And those programs, do they work? Do they help kids become better learners?
Research suggests they do help students improve their knowledge about cognition and their ability to regulate their learning. But the paper raises an interesting point. Just teaching these strategies, does it actually lead to kids developing more sophisticated metacognitive theories?
That's a good question. Is knowing about a strategy the same as truly understanding how it fits into your own personal learning process?
That's the key question.
Yeah.
And it gets at the second source of metacognitive theories, which is individual construction. This is the idea that we build our own theory spontaneously, partly to make sense of our growing skills and knowledge, and partly just to figure out how we learn best.
So it's like we're all little cognitive scientists experimenting with different strategies and trying to figure out what works for us.
Exactly. The authors describe this process as involving things like phenomenological bootstrapping, which is a fancy way of saying we project our own experiences onto others and use that to understand cognition more broadly.
So like if I struggle to remember names, I might assume other people struggle with it too, and that shapes my understanding of memory in general.
Right, and this personal theory building, it often starts within specific areas, like maybe you develop a theory about how you learn best in math class. And then over time, those theories can generalize to other areas as you see connections and patterns.
It's like you're building a mental map of how your mind works. Okay, so we've got cultural learning, individual construction. What's the third source?
The third source is peer interaction. This is the idea that interacting with others at a similar cognitive level can really push our metacognitive development.
So talking about ideas with our friends and classmates can actually help us understand our own thinking better.
Exactly. When we have to explain our thinking to someone else, or when we try to understand someone else's perspective, it can force us to clarify and refine our own ideas.
Makes sense. Iron sharpens iron, as they say.
Exactly. And they give a great example in the paper. They talk about a study involving the Woson four-card problem, which is this logic puzzle. College students were asked to solve it either individually or in groups.
Okay, a logic puzzle. I'm already feeling intimidated.
Don't worry, the point is that the groups actually did much better than the individuals.
Really? So even if nobody in the group knew the answer right away, working together helped them figure it out.
Exactly. And what's really interesting is that in many of the groups, the correct answer wasn't the initial opinion of most of the group members. It was through discussion, questioning each other's reasoning, that they arrived at a deeper understanding.
So it was the process of talking it through, bouncing ideas off each other that led to the breakthrough. That's pretty cool.
It is. It shows how powerful peer interaction can be for refining our thinking. And the authors emphasize that these three sources, cultural learning, individual construction, and peer interaction, they don't operate in isolation. They all feed into each other.
It's like a feedback loop. What we learn from our culture can influence how we think on our own, and then our individual theories get tested and refined through our interactions with others.
Exactly. It's a dynamic process.
So, to wrap things up, what are the big takeaways for our listeners? I mean, we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have. But the main takeaway is that we all develop these frameworks for understanding our own thinking, these metacognitive theories. And they can range from the completely unconscious, tacit theories, to the more conscious and structured informal theories, and even potentially to those highly sophisticated formal theories.
And simply recognizing that these different levels of metacognitive theorizing exist can be incredibly valuable.
It can. It makes you more aware of your own learning process, and that awareness can help you become a more effective learner.
So here's a thought for our listeners. Think about those areas in your life where you learn new things or where you solve problems. Are there any tacit beliefs you have about your abilities in those areas? Like maybe you've always thought, I'm just not a math person, or I'm terrible at remembering names.
And then ask yourself, what if you tried to bring those beliefs into conscious awareness? Could you start to develop a more informal theory about your math skills or your memory? Could that shift in perspective change how you approach those challenges?
That's a great challenge to leave our listeners with. And this deep dive, it's really just a starting point. The idea that we can actually develop our understanding of understanding, that's pretty amazing. It opens up all sorts of possibilities for lifelong learning and growth.
It does. We encourage everyone listening to take some time to reflect on your own cognitive processes. Talk to your friends, your colleagues about how you approach learning and problem solving. You might be surprised by what you discover.
Great advice. And thanks to everyone for joining us for another deep dive. We'll see you next time.